Good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 25th, and this is the Budget Committee meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Chris, would you like to be happy? Okay, so let's get the approval of the July 2026 minutes out of the way first. Does anyone have any questions or edits to those minutes?
I did not.
I thought that, I don't know what line it is because I haven't pulled it up, but there's maybe you can just see it. The place where we abstained from approving because 3 of us weren't at the meeting that the minutes were about. I didn't think it was clear that that was because we weren't at the, do you know what I mean? Like we abstained because we weren't at the previous meeting.
Oh,
Do you know what
okay.
I'm saying? So maybe just adding that
Great.
somehow in there. Yeah, minor thing.
Patience, if you wouldn't mind adding that to the minutes, that would be great.
Clarifying
To
the
clarify
wording.
that.
Yeah.
Any other changes? Would someone like to make a motion to pass the July 2025 minute, or 2026 minutes?
I move to approve those minutes.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Second with Chris? And Mike, thank you. Okay, great. We are going to have a public hearing tonight. We do have some emails to read, and there may be some people in the audience who would like to speak. But I have asked town manager to give us kind of a high-level overview of why we're here and questions that may have already been answered that hopefully will help frame the conversation and the maybe even answer some questions if there are some. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to rapid fire through this. Some of the items we've talked about, some of which you might have heard discussed or read about in the news. So interrupt me if I'm going too fast or if there are more details. And then I was hoping if you want to do the public hearing after that, just so the public, anyone who's in attendance that doesn't have a background or watching at home can know. So you guys are here today. We talked about this previously, but you're here today because over a week ago, the select board voted unanimously to forward a warrant article to the Budget Committee for consideration by special budget referendum per the provision in the town charter, the Home Rule Charter. And the question is, shall the town authorize the use of up to $500,000 from unassigned fund balance for the provision of ambulance and emergency medical services? The intent of that question is to fund a shortfall or a deficit that York Ambulance Association approached the town with earlier this year, the end of last fiscal year, and informed the select board and myself about. So pursuant to the Home Rule Charter, the Budget Committee is required to, once a question is forwarded, to schedule a single public hearing to be held within 10 days of the referral. So we're on day 8 or 9, depending how you count it. So check that box. Of the question, and the instructions in the charter are, at the conclusion of the public hearing, the Budget Committee shall vote either to approve the subject matter of the special budget referendum as submitted by the Select Board, to approve the subject matter of the special budget referendum with amendments. And then the rest of this doesn't apply because it's about school construction projects, so I'm going to leave that out, but I included it in the write-up in front of you just so you didn't see a bunch of dots in the critical charter instructions, but it's about pre-approved state school funding projects, so it does not apply to us, semicolon, or to disapprove the subject matter of the special budget referendum. So there's 3 options for the Budget Committee. If the subject matter is approved by the Budget Committee, either with or without amendments, the Select Board has indicated they expect to include this on the November 3rd general referendum warrant. If it's not approved by the Budget Committee tonight, the issue is dead. The Select Board can't take any further action on it to forward the question or fund it. So to provide additional funding for it, it would have to come out of the operating budget that's already been approved, one of those lines. So prior to considering the action, last week, the Select Board at a previous meeting had asked myself and the Finance Director, Wendy Anderson, who's here with us tonight, to perform a funding analysis, a deep dive on the financials. York Ambulance had come to us and said, we're short this amount of money. The original request was for $180,000 to the town. Their deficits and their cash flow projections were higher than that, so we wanted a clear recommendation of a baseline from Wendy on what her recommendation is that we should fund at their current burn rate, with all their current circumstances, to make sure that there's enough money provided for them to go until July 1. This is dealing with the current fiscal year only. The anticipation is that the ambulance funding question will be a much bigger, is already on track to be a much bigger discussion prior to your budget process and our budget, all of our budget process in December. So by December, there'll be a recommendation. There's several different ways that can go. York Ambulance will be talking to us about continuing doing business with York Ambulance in future years at a higher rate. I think that's pretty obvious. They've acknowledged that they would have to be compensated more per year to provide the service. Their numbers show that. There are other options like going with other providers or bringing the service in-house that all vary in cost. So Wendy did a pretty comprehensive read from their financial statements, including their bank accounts, their payroll records, so checks in and out. So from the tracing the money moving in and out to come up with a full recommendation, she had ended up recommending $350,000 based on that, which would be just to get York Ambulance Association through July 1 of this current fiscal year that we're in, or June 30th, however you want to look at it, so of next calendar year. There's a little bit of a cash flow cushion in there. If you look at the attachments that are behind this, Wendy's report is there. It says review of York Ambulance Association finances and projections. So if you have specific questions later on, feel free. I'm sure she'd be glad to answer them. Or the Ambulance Association is also here behind me, members of the board and staff. You also have some cash flow sheets there, the spreadsheets that are in blue and white that are built off of York Ambulance's original projections for the year. There's two, yep. So I'm going to go over the big one is what was originally submitted that we've been working on since August 3rd. That's what Wendy built her $350,000 estimate off. So that's their original projection to the town. The cover sheet is an adjusted, it's just two columns. It just shows year end, the August 3rd numbers and year end. Wendy put that together with their modified projections off of her feedback, and they're kind of going back and forth between Wendy and the agency's treasurer, the association's treasurer. So you'll see it's 320. There's a cash flow projection at the bottom, negative 320 for the fiscal year. So that's, I think, the most current cash flow and projections that have been done. It's a couple weeks old. That's correct, right? So the August 13th. So those are York Ambulance's modified numbers with Wendy's feedback, and she looked at that from the report that's in the this report that's in front of you from Wendy. So that's kind of the baseline for the conversation, and that's where the $350,000 number came from. So there's a little bit on top of, for cash flow purposes, on top of what the projected shortfall is at the end of the year. So also at that time, so the select board asked if for some reason we move forward, we're moving forward with putting a question to you folks, which theoretically might get to the voters depending on the outcome of your discussions. What if that even goes forward, but York Ambulance is unable to follow through the end of the fiscal year for whatever reason to operate? The select board asked me to put together projections on what Plan B is for the municipality, because obviously there's zero situation where we're not going to have an ambulance here in town. For life safety and all of our families and visitors and things like that. So these are not plans. These are just kind of magnitude cost estimates that I presented to the select board last night in a couple different scenarios showing what it would cost for 7 months, kind of in the right-hand column, and what it would cost for the year. You guys are probably, just as interested, but for your budget purposes, the left column is probably more interesting to you because that's next year, if it's a full year, for example, and what that means. And those scenarios are running with adding 4 staff, running 1 ambulance with 2 people on around the clock, 4 full-time staff to a fire station and 1 firefighter in the other station. Currently, our staffing model is 1 in one station, 1 in the second station, and 2 working around the clock at all times at York Ambulance, which is right by the village fire station. So the first scenario is intended as this is a crisis, how do we make it through if we need to? That's not a long-term, that's like weeks to months that we can do that because we're reducing fire coverage. We'd be needing to pick up people on an emergency basis, and we'd also be overworking the existing staff with less people in town than we have now. But that is an example of, we could do it theoretically with the income that ambulance generates here in town with the existing money that we have in the budget. So it is possible. It would be a reduction in service. It's not a recommendation, but just a kind of a magnitude. The second and third scenarios are adding 8 full-time people, 4 at each station, so we'd have 2 people on at each station and an ambulance. And the first one is just with part-time supervision, shoestringing it to get us through the fiscal year, which is doable on the $500,000 number that's in front of you, that the select board forwarded for 7 months. It would cost probably, as you see in the left column, roughly $550,000 to $600,000 a year to upgrade us to that level.
And that's a paramedic.
Yep, so that's, that we started, the staffing numbers here are for mid-level on our pay scale for firefighter, paramedic, so it would be an FF/paramedic.
Okay, so it's somebody that would have responsibilities at both the firehouse
Yep,
as well as on the ambulance.
correct. In an emergency situation, we don't necessarily need to hire all firefighters and paramedics. It could be EMTs or paramedics, but that's kind of a reasonable high-level estimate for the person.
So we're
kind of person.
basically, for intents and purposes here, we're planning on a continuation of the current staffing, like that's what they have at the fire station now, is firefighter, EMT, firefighter, paramedics.
Yeah, we're
And
about
it
half
would
and
be the
half,
same
yeah.
level of staff that
Correct.
we just have more.
Yeah,
Okay.
so firefighter, EMT, and firefighter, paramedics, we have 4 going on 5, I think, on staff for the town. And York Ambulance tries to staff the majority of their shifts with the paramedic on staff. So neither has 100% firefighter, paramedic, but there's pretty good coverage at most times currently. But there are times when there's not a paramedic on duty either, so. And then the third model is just that with full-time, some form of full-time coordination supervision that we would probably want to start a year off with, for example. If we were to do that, that includes a supervisor, ambulance director, chief, something of that level, plus a full-time administrative person. And the intent for that would be to handle incoming, outgoing, cash flow, billing, transition, things like that. So all things that York Ambulance is doing to some extent right now with their existing staff. So it recreates that geographically separates the model better, and that's kind of not a burn people out model. You have somebody to do the supervising and people to just do the shift work. So that's a realistic long-term model, which is, a couple $100,000, $300,000 higher than the first model and higher than what kind of the initial conversations with some of the other options have been, for example, York Ambulance for next year, full-time. So that's all that this is. This is just magnitude because the select board wanted to know what we're in for, and I think you guys, that's obviously probably a number one concern for you, or if not now, it will be in January when we start meeting because we'll be talking about these things. So projections only. We've since hired we've put out an RFP for a consultant to evaluate the options, the service options, current existing service option, and those several other options that I mentioned that are available to the town. So this is kind of a rough draft exercise that will be handed to that consultant for use in kind of our basis for option number 3 or 4, whatever it is, an in-house fire department to compare with, moving forward with York Ambulance, to compare with other private providers, to compare with every other scenario. So this won't go much further. It'll be developed much further if we decide, the select board, myself, decide that that's the direction we want to go. So this is just kind of hovering right now, just for your consumption. And then we also have, I provided, and I'm sorry, it's on 8.5 by 11. It's probably fine because you can, or sorry, 11 by 17. You can see it better. But that's, Wendy had provided a fund balance projection. This is not audited fund balance numbers, but it's just to give us a little reassurance, an estimate. I circled her forecast for year-end FY '26, right? So that you see, which is the circled number. That number, the $1 million and a few thousand, that is number that is above our 14% fund balance floor that we keep by policy. So that's the number that's in between 14 and 17%. So if this was during the budget year, I would be handing that to the select board and saying, you don't have to spend any of this, but by your policy, you have $1 million that is eligible to be fund capital items to be used to reduce taxes, things like that. So the amount currently being considered is within that number. So assuming that Wendy's fairly close on fund balance, which it's not audited, so we can't swear by it, and we shouldn't use it for any financial forecasting or anything like that, but just the comfort level that we're not spending our fund balance down to a level that gets us in trouble during budget process, the $500,000 question would be about half of that. So it would leave some discretionary fund balance for use during the budget process to fund either offset taxes or to fund capital projects. As long as that number is above zero, is above 14, that 14% threshold, that's all that matters. We're following our policy. Our bond evaluators, when we get, it's not audit, but the people who review our financial status that ask, are you following your own fund balance policies, that give us our bond rating, would look at that and say, great, you're within your boundaries. So it doesn't get us in trouble. And the proposal, another thing to add is the warrant article wording is specifically worded out of fund balance. So it's not raising taxes, it is spending down fund balance, and it is up to an amount. So if that's not necessary, the full amount, for example, if 300 or 320,000 is the amount and we get YAA, hopefully knocking on, plastic, recycled plastic tables here, hopefully everything works out great and that's the amount that's actually needed, that would put 180,000 back into that fund balance number because we would never spend it, so. Is that a good overview of where we're at and what the recommendation is? And now where you guys need to grab it.
Do you want us to ask questions now, or do we want to do public
Why don't we do
comment?
the public- why don't we do the public comment?
A lot of questions.
Yeah. Okay, let me just read my,
There's a few members of the public here, so.
yeah, there are some. So we're going to start our public hearing. Public hearing welcomes all community members to comment on the proposed budget item for the interim funds for York Ambulance Association. Please approach the podium, use the microphone, state your name and address. Please keep comments respectful and directed to the chair. Comments should be concise, free of personal accusations, and refrain from attacks on individuals. Accusatory or demeaning remarks will not be tolerated. We will do our best to answer questions or get them answered during this public comment in our meeting dialogue tonight. Great. Do we have people who want to speak? Bill, do you want to speak instead of us reading your letter? Bill Goodwin, do you want to speak instead of us reading your letter? You can't hear me. You want to start reading?
I can start reading.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. We received 3 emails with public comments, so I'll read each one. The first is from Nina Wright on Chases Pond Road. Good evening. I don't envy the decisions you are facing regarding York Ambulance. It is a terrible situation, and I want to say upfront that I have genuine empathy for the position you've been put in. We absolutely need an ambulance service. That is not in question. But the way this organization has been managed has created a crisis that now falls on the town to solve. Normally, I'm an extremely conservative person when it comes to spending, but in this case, I would rather see the town start from scratch than appropriate $500,000 to a mismanaged organization that has not been transparent with the public. They appeal to our emotions and to the essential need for ambulance coverage, yet they have not provided the basic financial clarity that any nonprofit should be expected to provide. Before any money is given, I strongly believe there must be a full forensic outside audit. This could even be written directly into the warrant article as a condition for a yes vote. After watching the recent select board meeting, it is clear something is fundamentally wrong with how this organization has been run. If 80% of their expenses in a budget that they didn't actually have are payroll, why has there been no explanation of salaries, staffing changes, or payroll increases? The public deserves a clear breakdown of how payroll has changed over the last 5 years and how those changes contributed to the current financial crisis. If funding is approved, a full forensic audit should be mandatory, and those responsible for mismanagement should be removed with no severance. We need to take a stand against nonprofits that rely on voluntary taxpayer support but fail to manage those dollars responsibly. I also urge you to consider hiring a new ambulance partner, even if it costs more. Stability and competence are worth paying for. And regardless of the path forward, a forensic audit is still necessary to understand where the money went. How could they fail to pay a loan that was only $600 a month, and now they're paying 30% more? Those are basic questions that must be answered. Thank you for your time and for your willingness to navigate this difficult situation on behalf of the community. Okay, second email is from Karen Tabora. Dear members of the Budget Committee, I do not believe the town should move forward with York Ambulance Association. The apparent mismanagement of the organization's finances raises serious concerns about whether York Ambulance can be trusted to responsibly manage a service as critical as emergency medical care. Once an organization demonstrates this level of financial mismanagement, assurances about future performance are simply not enough. Even if obtaining another ambulance provider costs the town more, public safety and reliability must come before price. I also believe town council should immediately determine whether these circumstances constitute a material breach of contract and pursue all available remedies. York should seek recovery of additional costs it incurs to secure replacement service and determine those potential claims can be whether those potential claims can be protected through a lien, attachment, withholding of funds, or other lawful means. Given the seriousness of the financial issues and the importance of reliable ambulance service, I strongly believe York should not move forward with York Ambulance. Okay, and the third is from Bill Goodwin. The $500,000 ambulance bailout described in the York Weekly appears to be a rushed effort to throw money at the problem. Citizens want a clear understanding of what the bailout covers and what it does not cover. The Budget Committee should use this opportunity to flesh out answers before voting for the bailout resolution. Ask tough questions about what is needed, when, and who provides how much. A month-by-month budget is very important. It can be built on a few simple assumptions and projections as it defines the town's commitments. Currently, the public is very unclear about what funds are needed from the town and what funds will be supplied by the current ambulance company. Below are core areas to be addressed by a bailout plan. The Budget Committee needs to ask good questions in this regard. If answers are not forthcoming, the committee needs to determine who will supply answers and when. A responsible plan includes the following. 1, the bailout is for ambulance services, not a bailout of the ambulance company. The bailout does not cover SBA loans, vehicle loans, private loans, or other debt payments, as those payments are the obligation of the ambulance company. 2, determine the extent of legal obligations beyond the town's promise of the $150,000 in the May budget, if any. How much of that $150,000 is still in the town's hands? 3, create a month-by-month budget from now until either the end of town contracts with another provider, either until the town contracts with another provider or until the end of the current fiscal year. The budget should include all revenues, all expenses, uncollected revenues, capital outlays, debt payments, etc. A month-by-month budget is needed as the local population greatly changes from summer to winter. The assumptions in the budget should be consistent with recent observed behavior or well-explained deviations from past behaviors. The budget should also be clear as to where the town's $150,000 is used, where any additional funds provided by the town are used, and where funds from the existing ambulance company are used. 4, obtain an assessment of the vehicles, medical equipment, and in-date medicines that will be used or need to be purchased. 5, determine an actionable plan to seek an alternative provider of ambulance services. 6, protect the town's interest if foreclosure were to occur on the existing company. Purchases of equipment, medicines, or supplies that are bought with town funds should remain owned by the town during this period. 7, create a separate fund for a transition to the new ambulance service provider. 8, from the projected financials, assess whether York by itself can support an ambulance service provider or whether it needs to be part of a multi-town provider. 9, determine a budget monitoring process for the rest of the fiscal year. 10, help existing non-management employees by encouraging the new ambulance company to hire them. The Budget Committee responsibility is to protect the town resources. We strongly suggest that the Budget Committee uses this opportunity to ensure that a reasonable plan exists to address the town's need for ambulance services. If more time is needed, perhaps the Budget Committee could schedule a special meeting to approve a ballot resolution. All right, thank you to all of those who emailed in.
Is there anyone else in the public who would like to speak?
Thank you, Courtney. Very well done.
Okay. Maybe we could start by addressing a couple of those questions that came up in those
Yeah.
letters, if that would be okay.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm noticing in the budget that Wendy very nicely prepared is that the SBA loan is in this budget for repayment as part of our plan, part of the plan, the rescue plan, is that correct? Okay. So one of the points made in the email was whether or not we should be paying that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I did have a follow-up question on that from, I believe it was the select board meeting on the 17th, which was, did we get clarification on whether that loan has now been sent to collections and whether or not that
That's,
is going to be owed at 30% greater, I believe is what I heard?
I think some of the ambulance folks behind me would need to address that directly, because that was, they're working on it, as I understand, but I don't think there's been a resolution, or at least as of my most recent information.
Okay. Maybe now would be an appropriate time to invite them up.
Yeah.
Well, because it's also, the loans are secured by the assets of the ambulance company, correct? Including the ambulances themselves?
The loans are fully secured by UCC of all of the assets and receivables and now and future of the company, so.
Who owns the real property that they operate out of?
I'm answering my understanding. Eric or anybody from behind me, correct if I'm wrong. The property itself is York Hospital property. The building is York Ambulance Association improvement to the property. And there is a lease process under negotiation right now. Is that correct?
We had a 99-year, dollar a year type lease established in the 70s. As part of the Maine Health purchase of York Hospital, though, they have come back, and that's one of the new expenses, is they want $18,000 a year now for the land lease.
And that's a land lease, that doesn't.
Land lease,
The
we-
building is the property of the town of York.
The building
the
is the
ambulance
property of
service.
York Ambulance.
Correct.
Since you brought up Maine Health, I actually wondered if there are any other sort of like financial implications to the acquisition of Maine Health that are entangled in this, right, other than the land leasing?
Directly to us,
Yeah.
that's the only one I am aware of. There's no other that's come up, no.
I'm sorry, who are you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Introduce yourself. Sorry, I didn't mean to say it that cavalierly. but
I'm just
please
the voice
introduce yourself.
here. I'm Eric Backey. I'm the president of the board for York Ambulance Association.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The loan that is with the SBA, is that an EIDL loan? And have you looked at, I know those are super low interest, so it's a shame to not pay it back. You could make more money in the market than they do on the loan. Is there an avenue for forgiveness that you have sought?
That was a question that we asked along the way, because we'd initially taken the loan and held that money just as a, good to do. And I think there was some expectation that might happen for nonprofits, but it did not. And I can tell you the current status we're working at the moment on that loan, there are two sort of things in flight. We can restart payments through the Department of the Treasury because it has been given to Treasury from the SBA. And there's two routes you can do with that. There's one route where we can file like a hardship form with them to reduce the down payment and go back to the original payment. Or there's one where we can instantly give them a small down payment but a larger monthly payment. What we have discovered, though, is that we've filed an appeal at this point based on a recommendation from the collections agency and a little bit more research that there's a a small chance, with like anything in the government, that we were potentially caught in a time lag when we made the payment up to date with them. So we're in a 30-day hold while the SBA reviews that right now, so.
Why'd you take out the loan?
At the time, it was because it was almost like free money because you didn't have to
This is the
necessarily.
IDL.
Correct. And then we ultimately used that money as part of operating expense here for York Ambulance.
And what was the date on that? When did you receive the loan?
It was
2021.
2020.
So cheap money at the time didn't necessarily have an imminent need for it. Because that's been something that's been bothering me is, we've gone and got the SBA loan at this other time, but then years later, now we're approaching the town for taxpayer money, where it seems like there could have been a lot of conversation in the meantime. If we knew the financial situation was heading this way, it seems like, other boards can talk about the blame and figuring out the path forward and stuff like that, but it seems like there should have been conversations at the select board, town manager level, at your level. In the meantime, if you felt the need, like if you were really that financially secure, cheap money, you still don't need it. So if there was recognition at that point to need the money, if your business model was working at that point, you wouldn't have needed to take the money. And now here we are just a couple years later saying, holy crap, the taxpayers, and I hate the term bailout, like I don't think that that's realistic, but we do need the taxpayers to come in and get us out of this mess that we got ourselves into. And when I say ourselves, I'm not talking about just you, I'm talking about the boards in town. I mean, we haven't necessarily had a lot of say in it coming up till now too. So it's all of us together trying to figure out a solution on this, but it just makes me scratch my beautiful bald head that we're at this point where like you've recognized that you needed the money, you've had the need for this money, and we had 800,000 in the bank and 600,000 in the bank, and now here we are asking for this bailout at this point, and it doesn't pass the sniff test. I don't like that saying either, but it just doesn't.
So did I understand that the North Berwick contract was stopped? It was all 3 towns, North Berwick and another, and
Right, about 14 years ago, we did take over South Berwick and Rollinsford, New Hampshire.
when they stopped in 2025, that's when the problem started to happen?
Not necessarily, no, I mean, it has been something where we've operated very lean, forever. We've never been a profit center per se. That was one of the things that heading into COVID, we were engaging consultants to come in, try and help us position for the future. We did that post-COVID. They actually gave us a financial model to follow, which we did follow in South Berwick and Rollinsford. But here in York, we actually never executed their recommendation. We ended up doing a 1-year contract when Peter first got here. And then, wasn't that right after you got here, we signed the first 1 year? Maybe we did it right before we went.
I've been involved with the current 3 years, so yeah.
So there was a 1 year that came out of that, and then this current 3-year contract that we're in, which we believed even going through the end of last year was sufficient to get us through the current year. We had been planning and had discussed, we met with Steve Burns and 1 or 2 selectmen in the 2021, 2022, not long before Peter joined, and talked about, because that capital fund had been at 600,000, I think when I joined, we used that. Ironically, the EIDL loan is the only loan we've ever taken, I think, in the history of the ambulance. We always were able to use that fund to make capital purchases, and basically had a 5-year rolling, we need a new ambulance every 5 years, so we'd be able to rebuild that through donations. But an ambulance 12 years ago was 150,000, now it's 450,000. And in that discussion, at that point in time, an ambulance was put on, we thought, the capital planning from the town. So we ordered the ambulance that you see sort of projected in there as a result of that, but along the way it got taken off, so.
So I have a follow-up on the SBA loan. So I am a banker. I work with some people directly at the SBA to originate loans. You might be getting everything you need out of the SBA right now, so it may be moot, but I'd be happy to reach out to them directly if
Sure.
you'd like.
Absolutely.
Just to get another set of eyes on it and see if, we're missing anything.
We would love
And try
that.
to get it resolved, so.
Sure, absolutely.
So on that SBA loan, then, it sounds like there may be a couple of different options as it's gone into collections essentially with the Treasury Department.
Correct.
But we don't know at this time really what they're going to approve. So it's either a repayment plan with a deposit and restructured payment, or is there a worst case in which it's fully due and payable immediately and the assets are secured against the ambulance? So I'm just trying to understand, like, what's best case, worst case,
Sure.
if you can articulate those
As
two.
far as I know, at the moment, the worst case would be that we have to make not as large down payment and much larger monthly payments based on talking to the collections agency. The best case would be the appeal process pulls it back to the SBA, and because we are up to date, and we were up to date actually when the collection came to us, when it moved to Treasury. And maybe you know better how it works. There's like a lag apparently where the payoff went to the to the SBA, but it was already in Treasury. And that's the technicality that we're doing the appeal on. What the odds are of that, I mean, I don't do this all the time, so it's a 30-day period of review where we're sort of on hold now.
And how long did the loan go without being paid?
I heard 300 days, I believe, was the,
That's what they said in the meeting.
okay. How does that happen?
Yeah.
We discovered it as a board during this actual process that had happened. So
When was that?
in March,
So,
6 months of payments not being made had gone unnoticed by the board?
it was unreported in the board meetings, correct?
so what bank did you go through for this loan? Because I'm wondering if there was an auto pay agreement that expired and, obviously it should be caught, but at the same time, sometimes it always happens on its own and then all of a sudden it stops and you're not thinking or looking for it to be stopping, so.
I don't know the bank. There's no bank. Is it direct?
Yeah, it's direct to the SBA. That's how mine is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I speak for all of us when I express my gratitude and appreciation for the ambulance services and for the quality and the dedication of the people that are running our ambulance services. It's hard for me to, as a nonprofit leader myself and someone who prepares board reports, understand how a $641 payment goes 6 months without being seen, that it wasn't paid. And reconciling that, for me, feels like this is the biggest item of distrust, because when we were doing our budget committee process in the wintertime, if the Ambulance Association had come to us and said, we're in trouble, we really need the money, Peter would have done everything he could to make sure that the ambulance was getting the money that it needed. And so I realize that didn't happen, we can't dwell on the past, but it really does bring into question the management of the board. And, as I was looking at the last 990s and the bylaws, like the bylaws haven't been updated in, 15 or 20 years. There's no budget requirement. The treasurer's job is to pay all debts of York Ambulance Association upon authorization of the board of directors. Did someone tell the treasurer to stop paying this bill?
No.
Did the treasurer see the bill and let you know that it wasn't paid, or how does that work?
It was reported to us, so when we approached the town in March with the original shortfall and started looking a little closer, that was added to the list of things in our board meeting.
How does one get on the ambulance board?
Yeah.
What's that process like?
We're constantly looking for people to join the ambulance board.
Sure.
it's one of those things where they, originally, I think it started with the crew. Over time, because it was volunteer.
Yeah.
Over time, as it became a paid role, they sort of elevated, I think, some of the ambulance alumni who had various business roles into those positions. And we basically do an interview process and a vote of the board, but it's
The board votes new members in.
correct.
Okay. I don't mean it as a
No,
dig.
no.
I just,
Yep,
help me understand.
yep.
Are there any staff members on the board? Can you talk a little bit about the governance of the way the board works? please?
So the board is basically an executive committee, so there's president, vice president, treasurer, and then the secretary who takes care of all the recording, and then the board members. The board is, I believe, supposed to be 12 plus the operations director. Since I've been there, we've never been able to get 12 people on that board. I mean, it's, so a bylaw thing, certainly in our little list of things we would have liked to have changed in the bylaws, a smaller board certainly is one of them, but partly because we,
How many board members do you have now?
at the moment, I believe we're at enough for a quorum, so 7, I think, is our current count.
And you mentioned there was compensation. Is that to board members? or is it-
There's no board
it's
member
entirely
compensation.
volunteer.
It's 100%
Entirely
volunteer, correct.
I have a question about fiduciary responsibility. So I sit on the board of a different 501c3, and I recently, like a month ago, went through a whole training about what it means to have fiduciary responsibility when you sit on the board of a 501c3. And maybe Heather actually knows more about this than even I do. But my understanding was, you know, even if things go awry financially, unless it's written into your bylaws, you have some kind of legal agreement, that sometimes the board can be held personally financially responsible for when things go completely astray, right? Has that been discussed?
And that's what directors and officers' insurance is for. But, I mean, I
Okay.
think you're absolutely right.
So also, my follow-up question is so if the town then steps in, are then we as a town assuming the liability when this it's gonna fall apart? Like, the writing's on the wall, I feel like, personally, so what happens then to the legal responsibility, right? Now, are we paying legal fees as a town? What are the implications of all of that? I just have questions, and I don't know who the right person to ask the answer is, but maybe you, Peter.
Well, I mean, part of the discussion, analysis, deliberation on our end has been exactly that, the question of if we're still moving forward with the recommendation to try to support York Ambulance, right? But if there is a liability that's out there, the money that we're talking about right now with you and the voters and is the money to run the ambulance function of the town and the fire department. It comes from that warrant article. So if money is provided in advance, so right now we're on a monthly payment schedule with YAA. So their contracted amount is paid monthly, and I think that's written into the agreement. We'd obviously continue on some sort of, that question was asked a couple different times in the write-ins that you had. So I think we've danced around that question with YA representatives, but on the staff side and on the select board and staff side, looking very carefully on that's why the liability, the SBA collections and the collateralization and all that kind of stuff got our attention, because if we provided everything as a lump sum payment in November, and then 150,000 or 190, whatever that number is, was taken, I won't say seized, because recouped, it's really recouped money that's owed to the federal government, there would not be money to provide ambulance service, whether through YAA or our own fire department or anybody else. So that's at the forefront of our mind. It's not, we've kind of talked about it with YAA and the staff, that there would be some, that's obviously got to go into an agreement. We talked about modifying, if we move forward till the end of the fiscal year, modifying the existing agreement with conditions. A lot of people who wrote in probably got some of those ideas from listening to the board discuss, and they had some other ones that we haven't heard yet. So the budget committee probably has other ideas as well, I think, or maybe some of the same ones. But that those would be part of that, so that the taxpayers have some understanding that there is a plan in place here, that there's a backup plan, and we're going under something that's an agreement, at least still continuing with them, and there's kind of a escape hatch if there has to be a plan B. We're hoping that's not, I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing about the potential of bringing the SBA loan back into some sort of payment schedule, so we know that I mean, that's things like that were concerning. Ambulance purchase, potential default, but it sounds like they're working on that as well to some extent. But those would have to be part of an agreement moving forward.
Thanks.
Or whether that's an MOU, whether that's an agreement, whatever that is about, hey, this is what we're going to provide, this is what the conditions will provide under, not to make life, the intent is not to make life difficult and, grind down on the York Ambulance Association. It's just to make sure that there's protection there, that it's clear when things are going to get handed over, what they're going to get handed over for. And if everyone's on their game, it all works out. That's the hope, so.
Yeah, so I think what you just said really bears repeating in some ways, which is because going back to the comments that we received, there's really there's multiple issues at hand, but what we're talking about is how it's written is, shall the town authorize the use of up to $500,000 from unassigned fund balance for the provision of ambulance and emergency medical services, with no reference to York Ambulance Association for all of the reasons that you just stated. And I do think that's really important, and I know that was discussed at the select board too. So I just wanted to reiterate that, since that was, many of the public comments that we got were referring to a York Ambulance Association bailout, which the way that this warrant article is written is very different.
And we should talk about that the warrant article for last year specifies York Ambulance Association, but in the fire department article. So we appropriated whatever the number that you ended up sending the voters that they approved.
Okay.
That is for the York Beach Fire Department, York Village Fire Department, hydrant, provision of hydrants, and the contract with York Ambulance Association, which means if we don't end up spending that amount that's listed there for York Ambulance Association, it's still within that warrant article, but it can only be spent through the fire departments.
Because we bundled it, right? This is our bundling thing
Yep.
that we were talking
Which
about.
is a good thing, just by chance that it's not a standalone article, because it would only be expendable on York Ambulance.
Yep.
That's not an issue, but it's just something to, when we start talking about wording of warrant articles,
Yeah,
these
Isn't that
are
fascinating?
things to keep in mind.
that we should consolidate some of them. Huh,
Bundled together, huh?
maybe.
Peter, can you just walk us through the contract process for signing this contract with York Ambulance Service? Has it ever gone out to bid? Has there ever been another dog in the fight as far, and I know that you've been through the process one time, but just, who's negotiating that contract? Where does that happen? Is it 3 years, 3 years? Is that the history of it? And it's just been.
Well, other than, I guess there was a 1 year, everybody behind me was nodding that there was a 1 year interim contract thrown in there as they were discussing it.
What sort of financials are discussed during the negotiations? I mean, I think that the fact that the town is feeling caught off guard by this when all the evidence was there is a little alarming to me.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, I don't know what there was there when we started the discussion. So what we had was several years before that in terms of financial information. So in 2023, we would have been looking at the 2020, 2021 financials.
Who looks at those?
So if anybody, so up there, back here, whatever, we looked at it, what they had available at the time were 2021 financials.
Finance director looks at it.
No. I mean, if those were looked at,
Yeah.
and I don't know who looked at what, because it was before I was here.
Sure.
The financials on file would not have been the financials that you're looking at now. So first off, that's part number one. The discussion that I remember was much more about the provision of service and service levels. There was quite a bit of debate that went on for several months about the percentage of time that paramedic staffing would be available, how many trucks. There was a lot of discussion about how many ambulances would be staffed at what times and reporting and all that kind of stuff. That
And we had also come back, there was a significant jump in funding in that contract, or that 1 year that led to this 3 year, based on what the consultants had told us from their analysis of York Ambulance. We had brought in a national EMS and fire consulting firm that worked with us and gave us basically that roadmap. So we went from, not the exact numbers, but we basically doubled what we were charging York at that time, 3 to 4 years ago. Same thing for South Berwick. I think we quadrupled what we were charging South Berwick at the time, and there's so few calls in Rollinsford. I mean, it was a significant increase for them, but their contribution is relatively small in the grand picture. So,
What is our vendor review process?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it would really be helpful to have a larger view of like how you evaluate contracts, what you
Yes.
require for them. Is there a contract over a certain amount that you look heavier at? Like what is our,
Do we solicit bids?
Yeah,
Yeah,
bids.
like-
What process wasn't in place that led us here that we need to now
I
address?
think
So-
the reason why I asked this question in particular is I'm looking at the 2024 990, which I know was not available during the last contract negotiation, so this is new, right? So during this contract time, FY 2024 happened, and during that time, the Ambulance Association lost $120,000 in assets and increased their liabilities by $113,000. Which to me would be a red flag. So I think one of the process questions I have is, are we at risk of this happening with other vendors that we are doing business with? Whether we're procuring a fire truck or a tow truck or whatever we might be procuring for services and for equipment, it feels to me like this is kind of a gotcha. So I think understanding that process would be really helpful.
Yeah, so anytime we're buying equipment, there is not upfront payment unless it's very well discussed and thought out and there's a good reason to do it. We deliberated on that with the purchase of a fire truck recently. Hey, you could save 10%. No, thanks. The risk is, what if the company goes out of business? And we can make 8% on that over the life of it, so we're not really making any money anyways by doing that. So discussions like that, there are vendors when you buy things that will offer an upfront discount. I don't think we've ever done that. At least not in the recent time that I'm aware of for large purchases. In terms of renewing multi-year contracts, the only essential service that is provided for the town by somebody that falls into this category, something that we can't do, a life safety, public safety type of service that is essential for this scope was with York Ambulance. We have a couple other nonprofit partners. We looked at that. I think a couple people asked that question, like, hey, what other, and looked at all of them. So we do business with, for example, York Community Library. You review that budget yearly. They are a nonprofit, but if they went away, the community would be devastated, but it's not an essential service that needs to happen. We do business with the First Parish Cemetery. Again, an essential, a service that's very important to the town, but not essential from year to year at a time. YCSA is a nonprofit that we do business with that takes on a town service that is general assistance and tax relief interviews and things like that. And again, very important to residents, but it's not something that the town would fold if that went away. And then there's a few other quasi-governmentals like the Water District, Sewer District, and Ellis Short Sands Park, but those are created by the legislature. There's not much we can do with, or the PUC. There's not any negotiation on a lot of those things. So, yeah, in terms of the actual businesses, nonprofits that are like subbing out a function of the town, this is it. There are other contracts, like anytime we do a contract, but those are paid, those are either monthly subscription or there's not anything that's a large sum that's paid upfront. And in this case, we're not paying upfront to York Ambulance either. It's on a monthly basis, it's reimbursement. So, I mean, those are all things that each contract's different. Each vendor is unique. Sometimes they need a down payment on something, but that analysis is done. Hey, if this is a large purchase and we put 20% down and they walk away, is this going to destroy the town if that truck doesn't get delivered and we have to resort to legal means? Those are, anytime something's inked, that kind of analysis is looked at, so.
Yeah, I'd say, putting on my banker hat again, a relationship like this, if we were doing our loans, they'd be subject to annual reviews you've got to give us, every year you've got to give us your tax returns just to make sure everything's staying in line. The other relationships you talk about are different. But something like this, where it's really an essential service that you're relying on someone to operate, with mostly outside funds, we're not paying the vast majority of the their budget, you know.
Yeah,
That would be pretty normal, I
And
would
that's
think,
a
yeah.
pretty, I think that that's something that's shifted post 2021 that a lot of people don't realize is that this was almost a net zero deal before. So I'm sure you had a lot of previous agreements with the town, but it was to be like a franchisee almost, like, hey, we're going to provide ambulance service here in the town. I don't know how long the town has been compensating, but it's been very small throughout the life of the whatever agreements have existed. So the agreements that had been in place have been more along the lines of, yeah, you're the sole ambulance provider in town. And they're licensed by the state to do that. So Maine EMS, it is a franchise operation. Someone can't just come in without formally getting licensed by the state and taking over York Ambulance's operations. As I understand it, right, it's not exclusive, but the state would have to acknowledge it's like healthcare. You can't just start a hospital under law. You have to have analysis done that says that it's needed.
I would say the other thing that concerned me was accounts receivable, so to speak, right? Your collection rate. And it's fair to say, obviously, you're billing private insurance, it's probably pretty high. You're billing completely uninsured people, it's really low. So, you know, is your percentage reasonable? I don't think we have a breakout per se of the different billable categories, you know, Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, uninsured, so forth. But, you know,
Who administrates that too?
I would say, yeah,
charge of the accounts receivable?
a better collection
Revenue,
rate
yeah.
obviously would not solve this entirely, but it would, again, looking historically, what's the right expectation? 60%, 70%, 50%? Like, if it's just the way the industry goes, there's a high watermark there, but are you anywhere near it, you know?
And are we in line with pricing?
Sure. Right.
So we have a billing company that does advise us on pricing and the various relationships and contracts that you might want to enter or not enter with the insurance companies. And same question, so when we brought in our consultants, that was a big question for us. We had, since I've been on this board, had changed billing services because we didn't feel like we were getting, you know, the right number. But somewhere along the line, the question of what is the right number came up. We confirmed that we're in the right ballpark in terms of collection with the collection agency, with our consultant. I think we either did evaluate or looked or did change right around that time as well. But the numbers have been the numbers, and we're sort of confirmed by that consulting agency as well, so.
Yeah, again, there's a high watermark of you're only going to get this much, and just obvious, but it's a big number that's not being collected, so.
Right. When you look at the bill rate of 2 whatever million and the actual collected of 600,000, it's kind of a shocking gap, so.
Yeah, but this is, I have this problem all the time, right? Because you bill something and then you can predict what you're gonna expect to get reimbursed, right? And it's not 100% ever,
Right.
typically, with medical billing.
Right.
So do you have does your billing company help you to predict expected accounts receivable?
We do. So, I mean, we know what that number is roughly going to be each year. It has gone down 3 years in a row. Not a huge amount, but that trend is downward. It looks like it's going upward this year, just based on call volume. Some of that is around the town, right? Our call volumes have gone up. The profile of those calls, though, has changed significantly over 15 years. You know, there are a lot more people who won't get into an ambulance. There's a lot more need for social service type calls where we're just going to a home and helping people in their home do what needs to be done, and then we leave. So that there's not, you know, a generally accepted way to bill that. We've tried a few things. We're working with the billing company. The state of Maine has even tried to address that to some degree because it was something we saw when we first picked up the other, like South Berwick and Rollinsford, that we hadn't seen here, and it very quickly, you know, came to York, and we realized just through Maine EMS that around the state that was a big issue. So, and it was part of the reason that it led to that blue ribbon, you know, panel that did give some grants to EMS over the last few years to try and keep, you know, rural, really rural, because we're technically rural too, afloat. But, you know, we even had a funny experience with that where we knew we could use that money here, right, to run our service, and even had some feedback like, well, you know, you guys have plenty of money. And we're like, well, we know what we have because we know we're just kind of keeping afloat. So and that money certainly helped us over the last few years, so.
So the question of collections probably is not the way I would look at it, from having run ambulance services and worked in communities with nonprofit and for-profit ambulance services in other places. It's probably the loss percentage and how much are you spending above what your whole revenue is, and 30 to 50% is not unusual for an ambulance. So meaning that if you're running a municipal department and it's a $2 million budget, $600 to $1 million a year, that has to be tax supported as opposed to be collected from ambulance revenue, run revenue is not.
Yeah, there's another good number they use for planning too, that $35 to $55 per resident per year is sort of a good starting point for that. So, and it works out to about the same.
So where you were under the previous agreement, 15% is a really good, not impossible, but very good performance rate in terms of loss, like from the town, I would say that's a very good deal from an ambulance, and that can be achieved either by being super efficient or, in this case, unfortunately, running a deficit was getting us there. So was getting us, the town, that deal, so.
How much have your calls risen in the last 5 years?
How much have they gone up?
Yeah.
I would say they have gone up probably 15%, I would say, from in that 1,200 to 1,500 range. That's just York, so.
And are you seeing a higher decline of transport than you used to?
The rate is about a third don't get into the ambulance at all. And we used to see it for like you go monitor a fire, or you go to an accident where there's no injury.
Yeah.
But the actual going to a home that has called 911 has increased steadily.
It seems to me that that might be a way to calculate a contribution from the community, since that's not being billed by the, to the insurers. Trying to think about it from a data perspective.
We went down that path several years back and kind of approached that with the consultants as well. For whatever reason, it doesn't quite
stick.
work that way, but you see still the shortfall, right? So it's,
Yeah.
how do you want to go at that? And you can think of it a lot of different ways.
I wanted to jump back, if we can, to the modeling that you had provided, if we can change topics just a little bit. I was trying to understand, just based on your description, whether, was it scenario 2 or scenario 3 that most closely resembles the current service that we receive through scenario 2? Okay.
Yeah, for those that aren't watching, or I'm not on camera, it's scenario 2. Sorry, I shouldn't use hand signals. I would think that, so that's the number of people that are working. It's a different configuration. So there's 2 people on almost all the time at York Ambulance around the clock, and there's 1 person on at each fire station almost always around the clock. Full-time staff or full-time equivalent. I know that York Ambulance uses per diems sometimes to fill in for, that's pretty normal in ambulance service. So that gives us 4 people on around the clock across the 2 agencies. The Model 2 would be just kind of like in 2 locations instead of 3 locations. It provides so I think that probably best describes the ambulance has professional leadership, but it's on a limited basis. I know Josh is an employee and the chief of the agency, and their admin staff, they have part-time admin staff that also work for the ambulance. Some of them might be in the room with us. So they've got some staff leadership as well as is kind of what I was looking at that model. That's just to make sure that somebody's watching just the ambulance functions on the town end if we had to take that over, because that's everything from licensing levels, reporting, making sure medical is stocked, medical reports are done timely, and information gets to the billing agency. So I would recommend under any of these models, having both run in-house billing and outsourced billing. I'm not going to vouch for the collection rate. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of how they're doing with that, but the company that they're using is one of the 2 that I would make sure got a solicited bid if we were to go out to get our own billing. MRS and Comstar are 2 big ones in the
Okay.
region. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 other ones that would put a bid in, but, so the agency's good. I'm sure they're getting good advice. I don't know if the collections are, how well they match reality or whether they could be higher or lower. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was curious, because as I was looking through the different kind of options that you had presented, and I know they're just very preliminary numbers. Again, I keep going in my mind back to, all right, what's worst case scenario, right? One thing I think as a town that every single person agrees on is that we need ambulance service. So that's unanimous. And I agree with some of the conversations at the select board, of, hey, we need to position ourselves, right, just in case there is a worst case, and we need to know that we can still provide ambulance service. But the footnote on the projection says it does not include the capital purchase of an ambulance or station modification. So as I'm looking through this, this scenario 2 leaves, let's say, 160,000 roughly, which might be able to be used for the purchase of an ambulance. However, the model is assuming 2 ambulances, right? Which then we wouldn't have the money to go buy. So I'm trying to just figure out, do these numbers actually work? Because I agree with the select board. It feels like, just asking for 350, which is the projected shortfall, is risky, but I'm not convinced, looking at the numbers, that we'd be okay with 500 either.
You said 450,000 per ambulance, right?
Right, so
Is that
like,
the number?
how do we provide ambulance services
Yeah,
if we can't buy an ambulance?
In that scenario, we would not be buying new ambulances.
Yeah, but
So how-
what if they get,
We'd be buying probably 3 used ambulances,
Which cost how much?
60 to 120,000 each.
So
but
we
who's
can
to
buy
say we
one.
could buy, like, you're buying those ambulances? And what if we can't buy those
Not
ambulances?
theirs, no.
It would be
mean-
any,
Well,
Yep.
if those get taken by the SBA.
yeah.
Well, right,
That's
so
what I
those
mean.
aren't
So, like,
available, so $60,000 each, I'm not sure that would be providing the same
Kind of ambulance.
service.
We're used to.
So,
Yeah, I mean, high mileage, so if you're gonna buy high mileage, you better have backups, so you're talking multiple ambulances. If you're running one brand-new ambulance, probably a very low breakdown rate. I would be comfortable running 2 ambulances in that scenario, having 2 on stock if they each cost $450,000. But I mean, in a short-term situation, absolutely you borrow. We rent, we lease.
So
from
that's
a
what I'm trying to
neighbor.
figure out, the way the warrant article's written, and is, do we have the ability, with that $500,000, we can use it for operating expenses or capital, but do we have the flexibility to lease or to bond or do anything
No,
else?
not to lease. You'd be talking about straight-up purchase. And we're also considering unencumbered contingency money, which is, to answer the previous question from 2 months ago, why would this all not come out of contingency? Because that also would probably be dedicated as fund balance contingency towards this at some extent by the select board. So whether that's, we need 150, we need 250,000, we have contingency money that could cover the overage for that. I would be very comfortable with $150,000 for 7 months of trying to figure out to procure an ambulance with the contingency money, the 300,000 in contingency, some portion of that. You're not going to buy a new ambulance. We're not going to get a new ambulance for 2 to 3 years if we order it.
I was gonna say, it's probably like fire trucks that take like
Custom,
5
you're
years.
you're gonna be,
Build it into
you're gonna be
capital.
buying something off a shelf, or we're gonna be buying used equipment in the interim.
We
Is
would have
that-
to go through the capital process if we're going to.
Anyway, that's
It
right.
was anyway, so.
Right, I'm just trying to figure out,
Yeah, I agree.
with $160,000, we can really get 2 ambulances.
160,000 in some portion of the contingency pot that's out there, yes.
so totaling what?
I mean, that's
Get on Marketplace, look at the
$460,000, so.
So this warrant article will basically authorize the select board to figure out how to do it.
Can spend it on anything that's related to ambulance or EMS services. It'd be a purchase, it would not be, a lease is long-term debt, so it has to follow the same authorization as a bond.
But it wouldn't necessarily even be encumbered. It's not saying $300,000 for this and $200,000 for that. It is turning it over to the select board to say, okay, now we'll figure this out.
The intent,
That's-
right, the intent is the $350,000, and this isn't gonna be written this way in the
Right.
warrant article, but the $500,000 would be on the table, that $150,000 above and beyond the $350,000 estimate, if an option other than York Ambulance. That's why the up to and the coming from fund balance is important, because if we don't spend that $150,000, it stays in fund balance, and we talk about it with you guys in the select board in later in the year.
not enough information.
we're not planning on standing up an ambulance. That is a emergency scenario. We're planning as Plan B if we have to do that.
Of course.
And if we don't pass some funding and York Ambulance goes out of business anyways, we're going to do it on our existing budget, which means we're going to be paying police officers and firefighters to drive ambulances, and we're going to have a whole mess, and we're going to have some pretty significant staff burnout to cover that, so.
Already in a mess.
Yeah, I think that was my question, is what happens if the 500,000 does not, the warrant article doesn't pass?
We reassign existing staff and, talk with them, negotiate what that would look like. Maybe some people might be willing to do it voluntarily, and we reduce other services to provide that. I mean, there's, whether that's myself and, public works employees or police employees being ambulance drivers, and some of our existing firefighters that are, EMTs and paramedics riding in the back, like that's the kind of reassignment of services you would see.
Could we produce a better warrant article that gives the voters a little bit more security that their money is going where they believe it should be going?
Or like oversight that we can
Right.
put into the warrant article that says if we give this money, then here's what we would expect. And I think that it's not going to pass otherwise, honestly.
Because clearly change is coming in this regard.
Yeah,
Clearly.
something's changed,
Like, we're past the point of no return as far as affecting actual change. And as far as seeing, the change agents that are going to grab the bull by the horns and plan, like, there's a lot of us that are going to be in this town for the next 30 years. And we need to, yes, I want ambulance service for this fiscal year. Hell yes, I do. But the year after, and 5 years after that, and what's it going to look like in 10? And I'm not saying we need to figure that all out now, but we need a path forward on this. And it's like, to be here, and I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to play the blame game on all this stuff, but it seems like so many things have been rubber stamped and high-fived, and like, just the idea that it's okay for the town to run fire and police, but we need a nonprofit to run an ambulance, like it just, like, all of it seems like now's the time to focus on that change and coming up with somebody that, or a plan that really works for this town. Like, obviously, we don't want to compromise ambulance service. I mean, talk to me sometime in my personal life, I'll tell you how it's affected me, We're not willing to compromise that, but how do we make this work? Not for the next 11 months. How do we make this work moving forward? And I know that we're the budget committee. I know that we're, the purview for us is the taxpayer contribution to it, but I just have a hard time, the taxpayer's already being squeezed. And I understand that, oh geez, we've got the 17%, so there's some money to spend. Well, how about giving that back to the taxpayers? Like, that's what I hear from that, is that maybe we're overtaxed. If we're building up our reserves too much, maybe we're paying too much in taxes. And so, like, I get it. I understand that maybe we get that down to 16 or 15.5% or something like that. But, like, they're already being squeezed. And to sit there and say, okay, we're just going to fork this money over at this point because we need to figure something out is valid, but there's not enough there. There's not enough there to
What are we
say,
figuring out? Like, who's got
all
skin
right,
in the
this is
game?
the plan, I'm on board.
Right.
It's just, there's not enough there at this point.
Again, this is not a long-term plan. This is
know.
Well,
this fiscal year
What
question.
might we propose for amendments, for oversight, and for, to try and get us through with some amendment to what they've, you know what I mean? There's 3 options.
I think we should get
Hear me?
specific about the oversight, potentially.
Yeah.
Like in the warrant article, so people can be sure that when they're voting for the money, that it's going to be
Is that legal?
handled. I don't know.
Maybe it's not all given at once. It's a monthly stipend that,
Sure.
it's a check that this is it, and we want to see on a monthly basis, this is where this money's going.
But I want to see, like, how are we monitoring that, right? Like, how do we get the information that we did not have previously regularly in an expected way so that it's public and visible and people can trust that that's happening? Because I would say this is not acceptable that this is happening now, but it's sure not going to be acceptable if it happens, like, again in the next 6 months, right? Like, if something else comes up, unless we've put in these checks along the way.
So as was discussed 2 weeks ago, my weeks have been every single week for the past 3, so I'm sorry. Several weeks ago, we talked, one of the recommended conditions from the finance director is payments. There was some back and forth at the select board meeting, if you guys were watching, on the date of the month following that
Yes.
we would make those, find bank statements available, and I think there was some settlement at the end of it that, okay, if we're just talking about a simple report, cash basis, not accrual on monthly bank statements, that they would come over to Wendy on, I think that's a tentative agree item, that those would be reported to Wendy on halfway through the next month, so on the 15th of the next month. There was a question about whether more time was needed, if adjustments needed to be done to those, but I think we decided, nope, we don't need that, we just need statements. So these are conditions, these are part of the conditions, the monthly payments, reporting, board seats, some representation on the board so that there's an elected official and/or staff person or some combination or multiple elected officials on the ambulance board. These are all things, conversation about debt, if they're taking on debt or encumbering any assets, which might be moot until the SBA lien is discharged at this point, but it's on the table, so. I mean, those are the conditions that we've been talking about. I think our select board members have more conditions. You guys might have more suggested conditions. I think you can talk about that. It's not necessary for tonight for this question, and it's not necessary to put it on the ballot, but I would think that it would be necessary for most people before they vote on it.
So it can't go on the ballot, or you don't think it should go on the ballot?
Both, I would say.
Can you clarify what can't go on the ballot when you're saying that?
Yeah, the warrant article as proposed doesn't have conditions in it.
Right.
So you're going to have to give me a second to think about that one. Whether there's time to change that warrant article language or not, it's been proposed. You'll have a public hearing on it. Whether that, I'd have to get a legal opinion on whether that can change after you've taken action on it or not. It was not intended, we talked about it with the select board, it is not intended to have conditions on the ballot, but to have a agreement with conditions that will be reportable and distributable, whether with voter materials or whatever, as part of that.
Yeah, Wendy, your write-up is great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Section 9, the conditions and recommendations prior to funding and all of that.
That's some of them. So.
It seems pretty thorough. Again, I'll defer to you, much more knowledge about how much to focus on the collection side of things. That's the only thing I don't see here is just any sort of, again, that situation may just be kind of what it is. It does seem really low, and again, that just may be to the type of calls you're getting. And to your point, if you show up at someone's house and they don't get an ambulance, there's no insurance claim. There's no way to do that. But otherwise, I thought the recommendations were pretty good.
So when we did the school contingency funds, there is language in the warrant article of how those funds are dispersed or how they are managed. I wonder if that might be a model that we could look at for the warrant article. So it's something like, shall the town authorize the use of up to $500,000 for blah, 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 emergency medical services to be dispersed in monthly payments, where all funds outside of the monthly payments will be voted on by a quorum of the select board, or something like that. Because I think what's tricky here is that we're talking about a monthly payment, right? And we're talking about reserves that we're holding back.
Yep.
And so I'm just thinking about ways we've done this in the past. I think it's really important that we have the reserves. Maybe to Courtney's point, it's not enough, but how is that money then dispersed in process? And perhaps voters would feel more confident if we knew we're not just writing a blank check to the ambulance association.
And maybe a statement that says, and subject to all of the conditions as outlined by the select
Right.
board.
Agreement or whatever.
And TBD on what that is,
Yeah.
right? We draft it.
Yeah, the October 2026 memorandum of understanding. Because I think that this just it has a lot of room for error.
Yeah.
And I get why it's general. It makes a lot of sense to be flexible. And from the voter's perspective and what our job, my understanding is to represent the purse of the voter. I want to know that there are conditions that are being met. I want to know this isn't a blank check. I want to know this isn't just going into their contingency fund. I want to have more information in the warrant article, and I think using those school contingency fund as a model, because that's specifically the way it's worded, in order to approve the use of these funds requires a quorum and a majority vote of the school committee. So when we were, several years ago, going through those, part of the question was, what is the safeguard, right? So what is the safeguard from, Rick just deciding that, his bus driver needs an increase and he just starts writing checks out of that fund. So I don't know, what does the committee think about that? And if that's even, you're obviously the expert, but we do have warrant articles that have had processes included in them. And if there could be some more detail around the stipulations are met in the, updated MOU, the payments will be done monthly after a financial review, and uncommitted funds for whatever expenditures will be voted on by the select board, because then it requires it to be public, right? I think that's the other piece of it. Not that I think that we wouldn't make it public, but for me, when we were talking about the school board, that was the safeguard that people were worried about. How do we know someone in the office isn't just writing a check from this fund? Well, we know because it gets on the school board agenda, they have a public hearing about it, and then the amount is approved.
All good feedback. That's not my commitment to make. I've got 4 board members. I think there were 4 when we started, 4 select board members that are in the audience, and that's a next Tuesday item. I think they're all listening. I don't know if anybody wants to grab a mic, they're welcome to. I'm not trying to monopolize the show. Or maybe they're nodding, but I don't know what,
But if
we talked about that, so I think that the board already kicked around a couple different wordings, if you watched 2 meetings ago, about when to put this question forward. They were discussing back and forth. It's not quite in that much detail, but very much that same, should we say 350 to be used for York Ambulance and up to 150,000 beyond that if the town needs to, got really complicated really quickly,
Right.
but I think that those items are being discussed. This one was forwarded in this configuration because it's the simplest and cleanest, with the understanding that there would be conditions that go along with it as a separate kind of document. And I think with the understanding that whether it's in the warrant article or if the public doesn't see it separately, or it's not communicated to the public, the people that care about that, which might be 50% or 75% of the voters, aren't going to show up to vote or aren't going to vote yes if they don't see that part that's important to them. So I think we get that, and I think everyone expects that there's going to be that type of commitment. I just don't know. I think my only question is, after you voted on a warrant article, can they go and change the details of it without changing the amount? Maybe. I'd have to get a legal opinion on that.
But if we vote no
Yeah.
to
don't
not
have any
push this
option.
through,
And propose a different
then
warrant article.
then can't we propose a different, or can the select board propose a different article?
Not at this point, no. Just timing-wise, no. Not for November 3rd.
What is the last date that this has to be voted on in order to make the November 3rd ballot?
Next Tuesday, there's a scheduled hearing for the warrant.
Next Tuesday.
Right, we schedule another special noticed hearing for this specific item in case you decide, in the event that you decide to return something. There's actually another item that's not relevant to anyone here, but there's 2 items that will be heard that night. So there's not, Friday the 4th is the deadline, and there's not sufficient time at this point to put another process to give you notice for another warrant article, for another, and this isn't, I just want to be clear, this isn't us trying to pressure you. This is the timeline that back
the
in
charter.
June, well, back in June, as we started running these numbers, we're like, if we don't start this process like now,
Yeah.
we don't get to you guys and, the select board making a decision at the beginning of August and then you guys at the end of August. So there isn't time for November 3rd. If we did it, it would be November 15th and we'd be running a special.
So in our purview, we have the option to adjust the number, but we
100%.
cannot adjust the warrant article. Like, what would happen if we
language.
edited it right now and we said,
This is
these
the
are the
article,
recommendations and this is the version that,
And you voted on it, it
suggesting.
wouldn't be voting on what the select board forwarded, so
right?
I'm guessing it would be a no, but again, I'm not the attorney here, so that's a tough one.
So our only other option is to not adjourn the meeting and carry it forward like we do in budget committee. It's one giant meeting.
And then meet again next week.
Yeah, that pushes it out past November 3rd, so.
I think my bigger concern here, again, I say this with a lot of respect and care for both the board and the select board and the ambulance folks and all the firefighters who are fighting so hard to make sure that the ambulance still goes. I'm really concerned this isn't going to pass the way that it's written. I think people want ambulance services. I think people are tired of trusting the system. And I think we saw that in the May election. And there were some traditionally really well-supported articles that almost went down. And so to me, it feels really important that the language is carefully worded so that because we're going to have a huge turnout for the midterm elections, right? That's the other variable that we're thinking about when we are talking about November 3rd, is that there are a lot of people who are voting who rarely vote and who may just vote no on everything. And so,
That's a good point.
Chris, what's your perspective?
No, I think you're right. I think people are sick of the system, if you will, and they could just vote it down. I think stronger terms of accountability would be in order in the article, and just, the urgency is clear, and everybody does want ambulance services, but it is risky to leave it open and just say we want another $500,000 for ambulance services because things didn't go well this year.
Because thinking about you and Owen and other people driving the ambulances as a contingency,
Yeah, right.
It's like Rick driving a bus.
it's like Rick
Rick
driving
driving a bus, which we were not happy about at all.
And to be fair, I'm not that insane that I would think I could actually do it, but
I
it's
know.
going to be people that should be, I use that to emphasize, it's people that
Right.
should be doing other things that
not
the
right.
town
So-
expects
so-
them to be paid for.
So as a fellow nonprofit executive,
Yeah.
my first instinct, and I'm sure the same thing of the trustees, is scarcity, right? How do we do this as cheap as possible with bothering as few people as possible? And now what's going to happen is it's going to be on the back of all the people who are volunteering and who are working, whether they're in fire, police, or in the ambulance, if this doesn't go through. And, we know how expensive it is to hire people and to find people and to be competitive with wages. To me, that risk feels, the human risk of that feels as large as the possibility of this not going the way we want it to.
I don't think we can bring it to a vote tonight. I'm scared what would happen if we did.
So can we talk through our options again of what the possibilities are? If we feel strongly enough that the warrant article needs to be reworded for clarity, revised for clarity, and that is not in our purview, we do have a quorum of select board members here. Could we do it right now?
do.
They're not noticed,
They're not sworn in.
not noticed
They
as a
didn't
public meeting
pledge
for this.
allegiance.
yeah, it's not, they're not noticed to take action on it, so they could call an emergency meeting, get on the phone with the Herald and let them know that we're gonna have a meeting under state law, but that's kind of, the public doesn't know that's happening. That feels like a stretch.
Yeah.
So options, right? So the question has to be forwarded. It's a 70-day lead time from the election, and we are in 60-something of it. So the window is between 70 and 60 days that you folks have to hold a hearing and return something. Also, after that, the select board then has to vote to put the return question onto warrant. So that could happen in the same day. But we've noticed a hearing on the warrant for next Tuesday. So these are things that need to happen several weeks in advance, which is why we noticed your meeting last, over a week ago when we talked after the select board voted. So this hearing that we're at right now is still. So the timing of it starts anew, and I don't think we make the November 3rd election. So that, I mean, that means it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. That means that it doesn't happen at the vote where 8,000 to 10,000 people are turning out to vote. It means it happens at a special a couple weeks later or 1 week later or 4 weeks
So
later.
there's no path just to, I don't think there's any viable option for us to not get this on the November 3rd ballot. So, I mean, I think we have to stay really focused on that. This is
So timing wise, if the question is, if the budget committee says we would not vote on this in this form, you would say tonight, you won't vote on this in this form. I need to maybe need a little time to look that up. That's tough on the fly. Like, could we notice the
Notice
select
it
board?
tomorrow and.
Meet on however many days later. if that's
So, I
gonna
mean,
be-
Then
you,
have that joint
you can
meeting on
continue
Wednesday.
the
Do a joint meeting.
hearing,
yeah.
but the problem is that you've got to get it to the board, the select board on Tuesday. And the end of next week is the drop dead date for the entire warrant.
But that gives us a whole, to be clear, it is Tuesday. I had to double check there for a second. It does give us a whole week to workshop the language.
Right, but if the warrant article changes, does that mean that the public hearing has to be renoticed because it's now a different article and people haven't shown up? People might have shown up if it was worded differently. It's a due process concern. So would somebody have acted differently if the notice had different language on it? So that's why the select board proposes the language, budget committee votes on it, it comes back to the board to go on the warrant.
So it would
So,
only be a 6-day notice of, if we were to notice it tomorrow, that the wording was changing, and that's the conflict.
the select board would have to vote to put a different question to you.
Got it.
If it's substantially different. No, I mean, could you make recommendations, we want to see it like this, and could they factor that in? I don't know. So. Oh, no, so the chair just passed me a note, that the voter guide statement of fact and all that kind of stuff that the select board do can also include those, so that's another way that it can be communicated to people as we do the voter guide and the statements of fact. So the board votes on the statements of fact, so if conditions have been adopted at that point in time, that could be
That could be,
something that's an official document, you know. The binding part would be an agreement between the ambulance and the town of how this is gonna be distributed. The control, if you want, from the voter would be, we're not gonna distribute the money for the town to disperse under these conditions. They're almost two different things.
I think it's a big assumption to believe that anybody reads all the warrant articles. As,
Voter guide, which is
voter
like-
with
guide.
voter guide is even, I mean, I know there's
Good news, there's only-
disagreement on our
Good news,
committees.
there's only 4 this time, so.
Right.
It's only 4 pages,
but
so if you
still.
can't read that, then.
It's no longer mailed, right? It's a QR code. There are copies at the library, but if you're a,
No, I think this
is it going to
one
be mailed?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
We haven't talked about not mailing it, so I mean, that's an option.
I appreciated, Heather, you mentioning that maybe warrant articles have been worded differently with conditions in them when it came to the schools, and I don't think the schools of the town should be held to different standards or levels of accountability. I think they should be the same, and I appreciate the urgency of this issue, the tough spot everyone is in. We're also in a tough spot.
So if we did put it on use the voter guide to more clarify the accountability portion and the situation, and then it got voted down at the ballot because it wasn't clear enough, say people didn't read the voter guide enough, would there be a chance to put it on a special ballot later?
With a different amount.
Would we have to, could we do that?
Yeah, I mean, you can have special elections as many as you want, and each one costs a small amount of money, and each one delays the process and gets us closer to
Yeah.
York Ambulance's
Insolvency.
issue, long-term issue, so.
Yeah, the cash flow issue is the end of November.
That's so the finance director just pointed, for those that weren't on microphone, that the cash flow issue is, we're bumping up against their cash flow issue for insolvency at this point, so,
Oh, yes.
in November.
January. Am I reading this wrong?
Yeah, that projection was the original projection, and that's
Okay,
increased
I'm not looking to
by
modify.
$60,000 or so.
Okay.
The updated sheet on the front doesn't go by month, but it's increased by a significant amount of month. Those Wendy's edits are reflected on the front that
Got
they've
it.
weighed in on.
Yeah.
So I mean, timing-wise, there's not a ton of time to work with, even starting in July. There wasn't,
Sure.
it's kind of a one-shot.
So just to be super clear, if we, right now, said no to this, what happens? Like, it doesn't go on the ballot. What does the next 6 months look like for ambulance service?
I mean, what does it look like? It looks like the town trying to scramble and
That's
reallocate
the,
existing
like,
fund,
the people
existing.
problem that
Staff,
Heather was talking- okay.
existing
I mean,
staff.
so the issue is we have a fire department, right, that could do the ambulance. We have an
Okay.
ambulance that could do the ambulance, but we don't have a fire department that could do ambulance and fire department with half the staff.
Got it, okay,
Right,
thank
so
you.
we can't
With
That's the
mostly
support, but we still have a
volunteer.
contract with York Ambulance Association. So what happens after November?
So there's $150,000 that would, 150,000 minus monthly payments up until November that's on the table. That's
Yeah,
less than one full-time person. That doesn't do much.
Unless they have an angel donor come and
right.
save the day.
It gets dire
I'm
really
not
quickly.
counting on that, but that is certainly an option, yeah.
So to play the opposite then of Melissa's question, if we put it on the ballot as is, because of the timing pressure, not because we like the warrant article, and it goes down, then what happens? So then the select board can then create a new warrant proposition that would be a different amount, correct?
Yeah.
Less or more, or whatever else. Todd's nodding. Yeah,
Different language.
We can have a special budget referendum on the charter at any time. There's a 70-day lead time.
right. I just want to be, I want to have the understanding that the select board is not then handcuffed, that they can do nothing.
Well, they
If
could
the-
still use contingency funds too, right?
They could still use contingency funds. I would hate for this to either not go to the voters because we decide it's not ready, or it to go down, and for us not to have an option. So I think that's what I just want to be super, super clear about, is that if either of those things were to happen, while it would not get on the November 3rd ballot, there would still be an option for the select board to revive the question, potentially word it differently. Would it have to have a different number associated with it? No, okay.
It could be a different question. You have another hearing on it to give feedback, public would weigh in, same thing. Sorry, my mic wasn't live. It would start another process. So with this question that's put in front of you guys right now, if the vote is no, they can't do anything with this, we can't do anything with this, it stays off the warrant. We could forward other questions to you in the future, but it pushes it back by, 2-4 weeks. So we won't be voting in early November, we'll be voting in late November if we wait until, so the question is if we wait until November and see what fails, that's another add 70 days on to November 3rd, and that tells you when you could earliest expect to hold another special election.
I would just say if we end up voting on this and it's a yes, I would spend the next 70 days being very clear about what the expectations are and doing our absolute best to have the voters understand what they're going to be voting for.
So, yeah, so there's two processes that are running parallel. One is that, the other process is starting to evaluate what you're going to see in January, because they're both happening at the same time, so. The request, whether that's an increased request in York Ambulances at the table, whether that's something else. And so we've got that RFP coming back, and before that budget process starts, we'll be evaluating, we'll be putting a proposal together. I mean, it's not, I don't think anyone's just sitting around, but there's just not a ton of time for it. There's not enough time right now. In an ideal world, to be answering the long-term question. So it's going to be
Right,
extremely pushed to get that question. We don't have a choice in front of the select board and in front of you for January, let alone, I mean, I don't mean to sit here and go, I don't know, but the timing is so tight on the November warrant right now that like, we're there. It's,
We're there.
and again, that's not intended to put pressure on you folks any more than I think the entire process is, we have like 2 days, 6 days, kind of, that's the window we're talking about.
I saw Marla's hand raised. Do you want to say something, Marla? Yeah. Come up to the microphone, please. Thank you. No, this is an unorthodox meeting, so.
We'll continue.
This may or may not be wise.
Yeah.
My friends, my old friends. I think you recognized at the beginning of this conversation that we worded the Warren article to allow us flexibility. And I think part of that was to give comfort that we were not making a commitment to one provider. And this is proposed to be a bridge. This is proposed to be a bridge while we study our options and make a more of a commitment in the budget process for next year, which I think Peter has articulated. So I think every time we met with the Ambulance Association, and it felt like every week that passed, we learned something new. And so the idea of establishing specific conditions, this is August, we didn't know what we might learn in September or October or November. And so the idea of wording it to allow the town to access fund balance, not new taxes, to provide this essential service was really, from our perspective, what this was all about, with a lot of work to be done, every week from now forward. One of the things that I think there have been some conditions that have been brought up, and I think that the voter guide is the place for them. And those would be conditions are expected to include but not be limited to, for example, and that's what we'll work on over the next couple of weeks. And I don't share your pessimism. I actually think there will be support for this proposal because, but we can debate that all night long. We're not going to know until November, right? I think the idea of structuring it like the school reserve account, while it's creative, I think is perhaps more appropriate for next year, May budget cycle, something more stable, but doesn't necessarily make sense for this interim period because this really needs to be a bridge to a longer-term solution. I had drafted some language, putting my banker hat on, as I hear where you're coming from. I had drafted some proposed language from what might go into a modified agreement with York Ambulance should this item result in additional funding to York Ambulance to bridge us to whatever the next generation of ambulance service in York looks like. And I'll just read it, just to let you know what my thoughts are about administration of any funds. Advances are at the sole discretion of the town. This is not a fixed commitment by the town as to the amount or frequency of advances. In determining whether to advance, the town will consider factors including but not limited to, because once again, we don't know what we don't know, compliance with financial reporting. York Ambulance will provide such information as requested by the town. Actual financial results compared to budget or forecast. Compliance with operational performance standards. Other resources which may become available to York Ambulance. And whether there has been a material adverse change in York Ambulance's financial, operational, or legal condition as determined by the town. In other words, a high degree of discretion on the part of the town. And then York Ambulance will immediately notify the town of any material developments, including but not limited to litigation, either actual or potential, change in insurance status, non-compliance under or cancellation of any agreement to include loans, leases, vendor relationships, et cetera, violation of any legal or regulatory requirement, staffing changes or other developments which could impair York Ambulance's ability to provide services, and changes in board membership or in board member or officer responsibilities. So to me, those are the kind of accountability things that I think would be appropriate to include in a modified agreement with York Ambulance. And if that gives you some comfort that although the warrant article itself is broad, because we need that flexibility to go through the process of determining what is best for the town, that I think it's the expectation of all of us that there would be conditions in an agreement with York Ambulance should there be additional funding, and also in the voter guide, not to those specifics. And I just wanted to, so I would ask your support for what the Select Board has forwarded to you for the November 3rd ballot. And then I'd just like to close by saying I really value the folks at York Ambulance on the ground, the ones who are providing the service, the ones who are taking care of our citizens, who are responding to emergencies. They're operating in an environment right now where there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of uncertainty. And I really, for one, appreciate the service that those folks provide. And I want to separate that from the organization, governance, financial management, whatever you want to call all those things. I appreciate that when I have my heart attack, that there's going to be somebody coming. And so I think we need to do what we can to make sure that that continues applying the appropriate amount of oversight, but not adding too much to what is always already a really stressful situation for everyone. That's all I have.
Thanks, Marla.
Thank you, Marla.
Does the board have any other questions, or do we want to take a motion to vote? That's where we're at, right, Peter? You have any last questions?
I would also just like to just talk about what the next month might look like and what we might learn and how might we be involved in the process
Yeah.
of what this is evolving into, because I don't love, it feels very rushed, like a rushed vote. Obviously, everybody has been rushed in the situation. I don't think it should have gotten there. And, you know, can we bring in emergency services next month and to our meeting and have more of a discussion?
That's a good idea.
I think, I agree. I was actually reflecting on I think part of the process, of course, the timeline's rushed. We know why, right? And I think everybody's doing everything that they can to do that. But I was actually thinking back to the last time we had a special warrant, right, on the beach purchase. And that comes, right, and we have to decide, we get the information in the moment, in the meeting, that we have to make a decision. I think that's really hard. And just thinking about the warrant article wording, right, during budget season, we have the opportunity to edit, right, and be able to go back and forth. So I think it's something just for us to reflect on process-wise, even though we're following the required process steps. I do think as a budget committee, we need to be involved in joint working sessions earlier than the voting meeting so that we can have the ability to understand the issue, influence the language if we feel strongly about that, and so that when we have to vote, we actually have an option, because I don't think we're actually being presented with an option tonight, and that's what's really hard. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it would be in the stipulations, like there should be a joint working, perhaps, relationship built to build the stipulations, you know? Yeah, I don't know.
I'd like to make a motion to take a vote.
Did you have something?
I'll second.
Okay, so we are going to vote on the special budget referendum question. Shall the town authorize the use of up to $500,000 from unassigned fund balance for the provision of ambulance and emergency medical services? Is everybody ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay. Chris?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Courtney?
Yes.
Adam?
No.
Mike?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, so 6-1. Thanks, everybody. I think we can be done with this tonight, because we still have the rest of our meeting to get to.
Yes.
Yep.
So thank you to all the ambulance people for being here, and
Yes, thank you.
appreciate it, your help. We welcome you all to leave right now, so
And you can stay, but you don't have to.
No, we understand.
We won't be sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
all right, so
You probably have to stay, don't you?
I'm just gonna nap somewhere off camera if I can.
got a sleeping bag in my car.
Thank you, guys.
I heard there's great camping out front of the library.
But I can't plug in.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
I know that's.
Thank you.
I know it's a difficult process. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Let's go ahead to, you want to do town first this month? I think we did school first last month.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you to Adam for being our representative, because I couldn't make the liaison
Any
meeting.
budget operating questions you need from me? I've still got the entire evening free before I've got to go home, so I'm happy to answer any that you have as I walk out the doors.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Fairly quick meeting, you know, second, or really the first full month of the budget year. And a shocking amount of time was spent talking about the Ambulance Association.
To miss the liaison.
You know, realistically, the only things that seem out of line as far as the expenditures go are really due to timing of payments and things of the like. You know, you'll see that, you know, while the insurance rate hasn't gone up, we've spent a disproportionate amount of money on insurance. You know, likewise, debt service, you know, is really high. It's right in line with where it was last year. It's just shockingly high for the first month of the year. You know, really the big thing that I noticed within the budget was on the revenue side that, believe it or not, parking was something I noticed. And, you know, yeah, you know, shocking. But I was comforted to see that the parking revenue was in line with what we would traditionally expect, or hopefully become to traditionally expect through a July of effective enforcement and collection of parking fees.
So that's 323,000
Yeah,
in parking revenue
yeah. And
for
then-
July.
And then we were ticketing too. So, and as much as I want people to pay for parking and not get tickets, you know, they were able to step up the enforcement side of it because they were able to trust the payment process. And so that's all good. So I feel like that's going to create a new normal for us on the revenue side of things. And I know that people don't like to pay for parking, but it makes our taxes lower. It's great. And it's good to see that heading in the positive direction. Now, that being said, you know, July will have stout August numbers. September, you know, visitation drops off. So, you know, I do expect that to winnow down and get a little bit more normal over the winter before we see it rebound in the spring. But I was encouraged by that. But there really wasn't anything, you know, one of the things, and we hadn't joked about it, but boat excise taxes had been down all spring. And you know, I'm always asking Wendy, what does that indicate? What is the fact that there's less boats being registered? What does that mean? It actually bounced up substantially in July. So I feel like that's normalized a little bit. So the clouds are lightening.
Clouds are
over
lifting
my
on
head a
boats.
little bit. Yeah.
Boaters
So-
are back.
So when we look at these budget numbers in the revenue report, this is the full year budget, right?
That's the full year budget, but it's only 1 month of revenue coming through.
Okay. I saw the interest income of 83,000 and thought it was 830, and I'm like, something's not right. So it's only 83,000. Does anybody have any other questions? I did hear on the select board meeting last night that the collections of online taxes are going really well. And that there is an option to now pay online. It's a $2 fee for an ACH payment and a percentage fee for a credit card payment. And that they are, they're seeing a lot of people participate in that. So that's a great,
That's good.
that's really positive because we get the cash early, then less collections later, so
I paid mine that way and it was
easy.
relatively painless.
Yeah.
Nice.
And they said on the select board, if anybody has trouble, to just call the town hall and they can walk you through. Because there's 3 choices and it sounds a little bit tricky. All right, any questions for our town liaisons?
No.
All right, well, let's move into school, please.
Sure, school was also very brief. Rick was there and Marie was there. Everything was, we had some questions the month before about some ongoing warrant articles and whether or not they were completed and so forth. They all dropped off. They're all done. So they're all gone. So the only things in process are current warrant articles, so to speak. Rick was not able to give a particular status update on the summer slam for the science labs. Again, they are in the process of hiring a new facilities director, et cetera. So there wasn't exactly an update there about whether or not it was going to be done or not. Outside of that, just again, setting the right expectations for, next year. It will not be another 1.9% request, which I think we knew, and that, it would be a harder year, so to speak, to get through. So, but basically pretty straightforward. I asked if we could meet some of the new personnel, the new athletic director, the new high school principal, the new high school assistant principal. Not that they're all necessarily new, but a new position. So
And
what's
there's an
the goal?
IT person too, right?
Right.
they just hired, right? Yep.
What's the goal of those conversations?
Just to generally talk about their perspective and, getting to know more of the people that work in the schools.
Did they make the budget?
They do not, I don't think, no.
I'm just curious about that because
You mean because we've gone back and forth about like what these liaison meetings are for and
well, just on my end of things, like should I be reaching out to the foreman on the Department of Public Works to see what he's all about or not? Like, because I don't necessarily from, under my purview as a budget committee member, I don't know if I see how that helps me be more effective at my role on the committee. And so I've heard that come up a couple times as far as the schools go. And it's like, am I not doing my work in the liaison part on the town or not? I feel like I am, so.
You are.
Well, but I do think that the school has also shifted their meetings in the format, right, where that it's a much larger meeting than
It's a lot
used
more
to be.
narrative, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so perhaps in the intention of being more inclusive of more administrators, that may be kind of leaking towards more
Yeah.
staff in looking at, hey, we invite these administrators to these meetings.
I just think, under the purview of the budget committee, I think it convolutes the process a little bit. Whereas we've got the budget makers and we've got the budget users. And really our concern, should be around the budget makers, whereas and then their concern should be the budget users, but as far as we're concerned, I'm not saying, I'm trying to be introspective on my end of the way that I'm handling things.
I asked some people like, what could I ask for? What could we ask for? And they said, you absolutely can ask for that. So I saw no reason not to.
Ask you for that or ask Rick?
Can we,
makers for that.
is it all right to ask to have certain people at the meetings? They said, absolutely it is. Yeah, go right ahead. I said, okay.
And you've seen benefit of it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, I'm a member of the town. I've got 3 kids in the school system. And I think the more I know about what's going on with the schools, the better job I can do supporting them in the things they need support on, and also pushing back on some of the things I don't think I agree with, or I don't think we would agree with. And, I think we saw from last year, I think the more communication and the better job we're able to do with things, I think we probably end up in a better place.
Less surprises?
Less surprises, right? So I'm always happy to get different perspectives too.
I also really liked just being a school liaison for the previous 2 years. I liked that we also got like periodic updates on like capital projects. It's like, well, where is that at? And then you can ask questions like, well, why aren't the lights being fixed? And we passed that 3 years ago. And like, what are you doing about that breach of contract? So it did give us like a little bit more room to have some oversight, I think, about bigger ticket things, particularly capital items, which is not something that we do culturally with the town at the moment. But it would be nice, like maybe once in a while, be like, well, where are we at with the seawall, and not in budget season, right? Because they're working on it now. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
I just don't know if like the third in command at Public Works is the person to have that conversation with.
Yeah. Well, maybe Peter is. Like maybe Peter could come or something. You know, he should know.
But like the parallel to that would be the superintendent.
Right. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I certainly think there's value in some of that additional oversight on capital and understanding, you know, like the facilities director participation. Sure. There was a big change, so I know when I was a liaison, a school liaison, it was the year before Tim and Rick came in, and it was John DeQuilla and I on that committee, and then kind of carried over. The meetings themselves changed tremendously. They used to be only the finance director and the superintendent, and it was a line by line drill down of every single expense and projections on where do we think we're going to be over budget and how are they going to handle certain things. And then they changed a lot, right? And I think including a lot more people, right, was, you know, I think there's a lot of benefit to that in terms of the transparency. The meetings did get very large, and I think also sometimes drifted, you know, maybe outside of strict budget topics. I think in some cases that context is really good, again, around the no surprises, understanding what's happening, understanding capital, but I think in other times it's probably maybe too many people in a meeting, right? So I think there's some moderation. So
Yeah.
it's probably a good time for us to take a look and say, well, how are we treating town and school kind of liaison roles, and
What's within our purview, what is
yeah,
falls in the gray
and are we
area?
being consistent? Because if we ask consistent questions on both sides, then we can better analyze, I think, information.
The more information we get, the better.
I
think
agree.
we can all agree on that.
I appreciate your point, though, Adam, on connecting with too many people. It can muddy the waters. You
I
know,
liked their rotation like
Yeah.
strategy that they kind of came up with towards the end of last year, where it
Yeah.
was like every principal doesn't have to be there, because that's not a good use of their time to be
it's
there every month.
Right.
But if they have to be there once every 6 months, like that's kind of a nice check-in to talk about the things that are going on in their school.
Yeah.
Because the principals do participate in the budget creation, you know. So I thought that was a nice way to balance it a little bit
yeah.
And
without
thinking
having the
about-
meeting of 30 people, to your point.
Yep.
Yeah.
But thinking about the town, like,
Yeah.
are there people that, I mean, this problem is the obvious example, but would there have been more transparency in that if there was meetings, like, with public
Yeah.
safety, you know, at some interval that makes sense, but.
I liked going out to visit the departments. That was valuable,
Yeah.
you know.
So maybe what I'll do for next meeting, we can all think on this a little bit, and I'll put it in the new business of, like, let's set some guidelines for the liaison meetings and what our kind of expectations are. I think, you know, my kind of longer history is that, especially with the schools, we felt that the information was being filtered that significantly enough by the time it got to us, that it was, we weren't hearing anything about the actual needs for the school. And so, you know, perhaps the pendulum has you know, swung the other way a little bit too far, but I do think the inclusivity was with good intention and really trying to make sure that the school administrators in particular had the bravery and the place to ask for what they needed. Because I think with the previous administration, they did not. And so,
You have to build relationships for those kinds of honest discussions to happen.
Right.
You do, and those take time and meetings and like.
And to that point, I do think there has been a lot of value from those relationships because they've made the budget process itself much more collaborative and open and conversational. So I do, I don't want to, I guess, underestimate that that value too. So we should.
But the town has stayed away over here, the school's
That's
swinging over
right.
here, like, can we bring it in the middle? And
That's right.
Yeah, I
do
agree.
both-
Yeah, the
both
town
of
one
them
doesn't feel as
consistently.
rigorous in comparison, I guess. Like only having been to like one, but I mean, that's just the culture of what we're doing, you know. It's a
I think we could make it that way.
Yeah.
well, but we also have the fall and the fall visits, right? I mean, so next
True.
month, we're gonna
That's
have
true.
public safety. And so while we may not necessarily hear about line-by-line budget items, that is an opportunity for them to say, this is the trend we're seeing. This is what's keeping me up at night. You know, which are good conversations that we were not having before with the school. So, you know, because we were only interacting with the superintendent. So, you know, maybe we just put some think about some guideposts for how that should work for the liaison meetings to make it more, make sure that it's equitable. And then we can bring that to the library too when we decide to meet with them. Because maybe in the long run, the ambulance becomes another organization that we're liaisoning with, right? I mean, that it could also be a really good setting the example. Can we move on to capital? I'm excited to see the 5-year capital in the monthly report. The one you sent, I think, only goes to Crest. It doesn't include middle school and high school, does it?
This one does, but what I was looking at, it doesn't seem to be fully accurate.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I see Crescent Village. Wait, Village, Crest, hang on. No, my screen just went blank.
Okay,
There's
there's-
middle school
And high school.
and high school, but there's, the FY '27 numbers are not accurate.
I
So-
think this is that like messy, remember they gave us like a really messy like plan that wasn't
Yeah, I
the
would
way
just,
we're used to seeing
This
it.
needs to be
Yeah.
cleaned up.
yeah, I want accurate numbers.
Yeah. Because this is now in the public domain.
That's
Where
right.
is this, Courtney?
It's at the end of the financial report.
Oh, yes, yes.
And we had this problem last year, right? We were talking about school consolidation, which is still in the conversation, and then all of these other needs. Some of these items have been approved, some were not, you know, approved. It's very confusing.
And I think my bigger question was, are these all, these FY '28 items, all things that we're going to see on the capital requests?
Right.
And if so, have they thought about how they're going to bundle those together? Because I think it's really important that the school come prepared this year with a direct ask of exactly what they need in the packaging that they recommend. And because we're in this, you know, moving towards consolidation, but still having to hold on to the older schools, what are we going to do about, you know, each year? So, yeah, it does seem that the capital really needs to be cleaned up. Because this is out in the public, it worries me that people think, oh, well, I mean, the last time I looked at this, we saw Crest, there was something on there about the roof, and I was like, we voted no on the roof. We didn't, yeah, so modify correct roof design to eliminate ice dams, $500,000. That wasn't voted on for FY '27.
Is there, I mean, can we, I don't want to be like micromanagey as a board, but it's always just bothered me that even just like the formatting presentation that we get from the school and the town is not consistent. Like, why can't they present us a binder like Parks and Rec does with a tab for each building, or, you know, some kind of like consistent formatting? Because it really is all one capital plan.
Yeah.
And I know we have to discuss it in a siloed way because that's what we have to do for process. But really, at the end, it should really just all be integrated together, right? Like, why don't we have a vehicle replacement schedule that looks like the police department one? You know, and I've brought that to them before, and I've handed them a copy, but it's just not being heard. Kind of, maybe that's something you could work on in your liaison meeting, because it's a format that works, and it would make their presentation cleaner for them, right? Publicly and for us, and
Then again, on the other side, right, we're not seeing any preview information from the town on what they're
Right,
thinking on
that's right.
capital. So I do agree, it's one capital
it should be
plan,
integrated.
And yeah, and I agree, the level of detail is widely varied, and how they keep up to date is, so.
It should be one capital plan. Like when we get that little packet that's like FY '25 and it's like that, you know, Peter gives it to us, it should have the school stuff already on it. Like it shouldn't be added
will.
later.
It will.
Yeah, okay,
It will.
all right,
I have faith.
good.
I've seen it done before. I
You
have
can do
faith.
it, we can do it, everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the school? Any other new business anybody needs to bring up? No, great. Okay, so our next meeting is supposed to be
Tomorrow, no.
Wednesday, September 16th, joint committee meeting with the school committee. I have been advised that they are probably not going to have the information at that time that they want to share with us. So I'm going to work on a new date to make sure that when we meet with them, it's a meeting with all the information, because they really want to present the consolidation information to us. And
I thought they had said that the first meeting in September, they wouldn't have it, but they would have it by that's their second meeting, which is the 16th.
I'll check.
Okay.
I'll check.
So are you going to be going to that school?
So the idea was that that was going to be a joint meeting.
Okay.
So I'll check in with the school chair and just make sure that if that date does not work, when will it be? Because it likely will be their next one, the first week in October. So on September 22nd, I had in the draft that we were having the school, but that is incorrect. We are inviting the public safety officials for next month. And I will work on making sure that all of those folks can join us.
I will not be at that meeting.
Okay.
just so you know.
No problem.
Public safety includes ambulance?
It does.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But right, we don't really have a representative
No, we don't.
from York Ambulance, but I think it is worth
The fire chief's perspective.
the fire
at least.
chiefs. And I think having the operations director from York Ambulance makes a lot of sense to have in that conversation, because it is a really complicated issue. And
If there are
Yeah.
people willing, I'd like to maybe have some volunteers come too, just
yeah,
like understand their experience of basically
on the front line.
Yeah, providing service
like having them
for free.
speak.
Yeah, or just
If they want
if
to.
they
like-
want to, or like here to answer some questions. I think that'd be a good perspective to have.
Well, we can certainly ask for some guest speakers.
Yeah.
They could actually present in public comment anyway. and
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have anything else?
Do we have any early insight on either other departments? I know we're going to invite to our meetings, I would assume in November, December, but on capital planning meetings or anything else? Do we have any?
October.
Yeah, I talked with Peter yesterday about that actually, and he told me he would have a calendar to us early next week. He said he's going to use the November date to back up. But they will be public meetings, it sounds like, and they're still working on scheduling them,
I
so.
really liked that they were televised last year. I
Yes,
Really liked
agreed.
that. Yeah, that was good.
Agreed. And some of the reason why the meetings were on kind of an erratic schedule had to do with the ability for them to be televised. So maybe Alex can just YouTube it,
Yeah.
video us and YouTube it.
Let's get that up and running.
I mean,
Come on,
that's
Alex.
been,
Yeah.
huge improvement. So.
Yeah, it's a huge improvement. All right, anything else? Okay, thanks everybody for being here. I know everyone spent quite a bit of time prepping, so I appreciate that. And you will be hearing from me about the 16th meeting, and for sure, we will be back here on the 22nd at 7 p.m. with public safety and our monthly reports.
I move to adjourn.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Adam. Thank you, Courtney. We are adjourned.